Okay, so you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, we're going deep on something pretty fundamental this time, something we all do every single day, reading and writing.
Back to basics. I like it.
Right. But here's the thing. Even the basics, when you really look closely, can be surprisingly complex. And when we get a handle on them, it can transform how we communicate.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to unpack what it means to really understand, like dissect simple text, like what actually makes a text simple.
Right.
And we're also going to look at how to craft those short, powerful paragraphs.
Yeah, those are the building blocks.
Exactly. And in the learning module you sent over, I mean, there were some things in there, some real insights that I never really thought about before.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's jump right in. I'm kind of hung up on this idea of text complexity. Like, how do we even measure that? What makes a text simple? I mean, isn't that kind of subjective?
It actually it seems subjective, but there's a way to measure it. One way is something called the Lexile framework,
Okay.
and that looks at two main things: word frequency and sentence length.
Okay, so like the more common the words are, the simpler the text.
Exactly, and the shorter the sentences also contribute to a simpler text, and they put those two things together to kind of come up with a measure, a number that rates the complexity.
Okay, that's really interesting. So it's not just like a feeling. It's like you can actually get kind of a scientific measure of how complex a text is.
Yep.
Why? Why should we even care about this?
Well, it helps us to choose texts that are appropriate for our level, right? For our reading level. So if we're constantly struggling with really complex texts, we might get frustrated.
Oh,
We might give up.
yeah.
So knowing, kind of where we are and then picking texts that are maybe just a little bit challenging but not too overwhelming can really help us to grow as readers.
Right. So it's like weight training. You don't start with the heaviest weight. You
Exactly.
kind of have to kind of work your way up.
Build up to it.
Yeah. All right, that makes a lot of sense. So we've kind of tackled reading simple texts. Now let's flip over to the writing side of things. When we're talking about basic writing techniques, what are some of the absolute essentials we should all have in our toolbox, especially when we're trying to write these short, powerful paragraphs?
Well, I think one of the most essential techniques is something that everybody's heard of, the topic sentence.
Okay, yeah.
And the topic sentence is just that first sentence in the paragraph that really tells the reader what the paragraph is going to be about. But it's more than just stating the topic.
What do you mean?
You also want to make it engaging. You want to make it
Oh.
interesting. You want to hook the reader, right? So it's not just, this paragraph is about cats. It's cats are fascinating creatures with a long and storied history.
Okay, yeah, that's way more interesting. So it's not just like blandly stating what the topic is. You're kind of setting the stage.
Exactly. Setting the stage and inviting the reader in.
All right, so we've got that great topic sentence, that hook. What comes next?
Well, then you need supporting details.
Okay.
So that's where you bring in the facts, the examples, the anecdotes, whatever you need to really flesh out that topic and make it come to life.
Right, the meat of it.
Yeah, exactly. You want to give the reader enough to understand and really be convinced by your point.
So you're not just making a claim, you're backing it up.
Exactly.
Okay, so topic sentence, supporting details, anything else?
The third thing is transitions.
Ah.
And this is so important because it helps the reader follow your train of thought. It helps the writing flow smoothly.
Okay, can you give me an example of a transition?
Yeah, sure. So, you could say something like, furthermore, to add another point, or however, to introduce a contrasting idea.
On the other hand...
On the other hand, yeah, there you go. There's a whole bunch of them.
Okay, cool. So it's like the glue that holds the whole thing together.
Exactly. The glue that makes it all make sense.
All right, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But, I think this is where I sometimes go wrong. Like, I get so excited about the topic, I have all these supporting details, and then I end up with these gigantic paragraphs that are like a mile long.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. So is there like a sweet spot for paragraph length? Especially when we're talking about beginners, people just starting out with their writing.
Well, I think the sweet spot is really about finding the balance between conciseness and clarity.
Okay.
You don't want your paragraphs to be too long because, like you said, it can be overwhelming for the reader.
Yeah, it's like a wall of text.
Exactly.
Nobody wants to read that.
But you also don't want them to be too short because then you might not be able to fully develop your ideas. So I think a good rule of thumb, especially for beginners, is to aim for paragraphs that are, 3 to 5 sentences long. Okay, that's helpful. So it's finding that balance. But isn't there also a visual aspect to paragraphs too? Like, don't they give the reader a break?
Absolutely. That's one of their main purposes, right? They chunk information visually.
Mm.
So even if your paragraph isn't super long, if it's dealing with a complex idea, giving it its own paragraph can help the reader process that information before moving on to the next one.
Oh, that's a good point. It's like a pause, a little breather.
Exactly.
I'm remembering this article I read once, and it was just one giant paragraph. Like the entire article was just one paragraph.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't do it. It was just too much.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare.
I mean, it was interesting information, but I just gave up halfway through.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that form is important too. Like how we present the information is just as important as the information itself. Totally.
Mhm.
And this is making me think about, all the ways we encounter written communication in everyday life, not just books and articles. We're writing emails, social media posts, even just like quick text messages.
Right.
So do these principles, do they apply there too?
Absolutely. I think they're even more important in those contexts because people's attention spans are so short. If you send someone a giant wall of text in an email, they're probably not going to read it.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. It's got to be snappy. It's got to be engaging.
Exactly. So even if you're not writing a formal essay, being mindful of these basic techniques can really help you communicate more effectively.
So it's like, it's not just for like academic writing, it's for life.
Exactly. It's for life.
I love that.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, it seems like even simple reading and writing, I mean, they have all these hidden depths we've been uncovering. It's not just about knowing the rules. It's about understanding how those rules work and how we can use them to really make our communication sing.
That's a great way to put it. It's about mastering the fundamentals so you can then build on them and really find your own voice.
Exactly, yeah.
And I guess a final thought for our listeners would be, how can you use these concepts to become not just a better reader, but a more critical reader? How can you use these concepts to become a more persuasive writer? Because I think if you really take these things to heart, you'll be surprised at the impact you can have.
That's a great question to leave everyone with.
Yeah, hopefully it'll get them thinking.
I think it will. Thanks for joining me today.
It was my pleasure.